to invite up Professor Tommaso Melodia. The Power Project Office is composed of US Ignite, a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., and Northeastern University. Professor Melodia serves as the research director for the program office, and will walk through some of the guiding principles for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I want to thank the National Science Foundation and the Industry Consortium for giving all of us this opportunity to be here, and I want to thank US Ignite for being the best possible partner in this. We're going to talk a little bit about the vision that we have for power. Now, we know that there's quite a few challenges. Some have been brought up today. There is a significant gap between basic research that is being conducted in universities and in research groups, and what industry is looking for in many cases. Too often, research results don't make it out of the lab. There is, of course, a lot of basic research is based on modeling and simulation. That's very important. But the wireless research community has recognized increasingly in the last few years that there is a need for experimental research. But there have been a lot of challenges with experimental research in the last few years. And I think most of us would recognize that a lot of the experimental research that's been going on has been small scale. I'm sure most of the academic researchers that are here in the room today have their own small-scale academic testbed with a few radios, a few programmable radios. A lot of the tests, of the testing platforms that we use are ad hoc, okay? So are designed and implemented for a specific project. Unfortunately, a lot of the research that is published is seen by many as lacking rigor, and especially in lacking reproducibility. So research results generated by researcher A cannot be reproduced by researcher B, primarily because the platforms that they're based on are different. Now, we think that power is the best thing that has happened in wireless in the last few years, and it's an unprecedented opportunity to change the state of affairs in wireless research. Okay? First of all, by creating what we like to call an evidence-driven community of wireless experimenters with a shared culture and high standards. Okay? Experimental research doesn't need to be less rigorous than theoretical research. We think that power can bridge the gap between academic research community and industry, get the two communities closer, make sure that industry is aware of the great things that are happening in wireless research labs. And at the end, we think that this can result in innovation, okay, new ideas, new startups that can be created by industry, working with academic researchers and working with local communities that can foster innovation and connect research with the local substrate. Now, we think that for power to be a success, a few things need to happen. Okay, we're not gonna change the state of affairs in experimental research just by throwing some money into the research community. There's a few things that need to happen. One of them is that the platforms need to be designed, maintained, and set up to encourage reproducibility of research. Okay? So it needs to lead to high scientific standards, accuracy of results that are obtained with the platforms, and repeatability. Again, researcher B needs to be able to repeat the experiments that have been done by researcher A. We need to, as a community, as a wireless community, we need to, in a sense, shrink the tree of knowledge. We need to understand some specific basic problems more deeply, rather than having a plethora of different results that are uncomparable to one another. We need to have interoperability. So platforms should not be isolated from one another. Okay? Different power platforms should be able to interoperate with one another. Okay? and Power Platforms will have to be connected with previous research infrastructure, previous investments by the NSF and other things. I see some people smiling in the audience. Open access is a very important principle. The platforms need to be really open for all researchers to use, okay, with fairness of access through different geographical areas and communities. Platforms need to be usable, and we cannot emphasize this enough, okay? We need for the platforms to have a low learning curve, okay? What we've been saying is that the Power Platforms need to be a person with basic technical training with a bachelor needs to be able to operate a Power Platform, okay? More advanced and sophisticated users need to be able to reprogram the platforms, okay? And will have access inevitably to more advanced functionalities. But you don't need to be an experienced researcher with 10 years of experience to be able to operate a Power Platform. Programmability. This is something we'll talk about quite a bit today. We would like for the platforms to be programmable at multiple levels. Okay? So in terms of the radio, the resource allocation, the backbone, all of these elements should have a level of programmability. And of course, everything should be properly documented with clearly defined interfaces. And then we want Power Platforms to serve, to have diversity. Okay, diversity in terms of the topics. We're listing a non-exhaustive list of topics here, like spectrum, millimeter wave, Internet of Things, wide area wireless backhaul, etc. This is obviously a non-exhaustive list of the areas that we would like for the platforms to cover. Sustainability is, again, one of the guiding principles. It deserves a separate slide. Sustainability is the idea that we want long-lasting platforms that will have a strong research impact, okay? And this will be obtained through a few different things. One is the operational and financial models of the platforms. This will have to guarantee financial sustainability beyond the 5 years of initial funding of the platforms. And proposers are encouraged to be creative on how this can happen. Involvement of local communities. Okay, so we think that communities that facilitate things like providing access to low-cost real estate or streamlining permitting processes, okay, will go a long way into making sure that platform proposers have more resources available to for other things. Okay, so the participation of local communities is seen as crucial for platform sustainability. And last, we think that we envision platforms to be modular. Okay? As Tiago was mentioning, wireless technologies evolve every 2 years. Okay? So we need this platform for these platforms to be long-lasting. They need to be modular. They can be updated and upgraded in multiple years. Okay? This is pretty much all I had to say, and I'll leave the stage to Manu Gosain. Manu's role is of technical program director. Manu has joined Northeastern in March of this year to work on the PPO. Okay, so Manu will be the go-to person for all technical questions regarding the architecture of power.
Remember my face. This is the right. Okay. Okay, I am prepared to duck for what I'm about to say. A couple of things are going to be level setting for what we envision or what my past experience working on large-scale distributor testbeds has gotten me to do. So I might sort of temper some expectations and sort of talk about how things are hard. It is a hard problem. We acknowledge that. We realize that. Couple of things that I'd like to just, talk about as when people in this room are thinking about visioning exercise of what their version of a power platform is going to be, some of the things to sort of keep in mind, having seen a large-scale distributor test beds evolve over the past few years. One of the things, the main components of this platform is going to include spectrum. Wireless research cannot be conducted without access to spectrum. We will be listening to FCC speak about spectrum requirements and compliance issues with spectrum for power platforms. But what I want to stress on is we are here in end of April 2017. As people leave this room, they're going to be working on their preliminary proposals. A select few will make it to a full proposal stage. But the timeline that we're thinking about before these platforms are developed, deployed, and ready to use is late 2018, maybe early 2019. So as you go through the visioning exercise, please remember these following things. One is access to spectrum and how the power program or the platform is going to manage spectrum and spectrum access for experimenters as well as for the deployment. Rebecca did a great job talking about the experience that our industry consortium members bring for site locations. You're going to be writing proposals about what the power sites are, which are actually the fundamental units or the instantiation of what these platforms are going to look like. We understand as time goes by, priorities change, locations might change, things might come up. You have a big list of things that you need to accomplish before these platforms can come online. So please be prepared to think through those issues as these power awards are made and before your deployments go up. So contingencies would be good, risk reduction would be good, things of that sort. So it would be really good for the proposers to understand. The hardware and software infrastructure. The idea here is not to deploy something that's commercially available. We want to be a step or maybe 2 steps ahead of what is feasible today. So when you're doing your visioning exercise, you're going to come up with hardware and software that might challenge what industry can provide. This is going to be a process that the PPO is going to work with the finalists and the full proposal submitters. But this is, again, the idea is here, what I want to stress is this is a long lead time between today and when the winning platforms are going to be operational, deployed, and ready. So just again, level setting and tempering some expectations here. We also do understand with developing platforms, there's a big trade-off between innovation and stability of platforms. This is sort of a question that people who've developed large-scale distributed test beds, either in industry or in academia, have obviously come across. Where, how do you do that visioning exercise where you need the innovation because you need the agility and you need to stay relevant over as time goes on, but you also want to be stable and usable. We understand that you're going to be experimenting while you're building this platform, but this platform needs to be usable. I think James obviously highlighted really important aspect of system integration. There are going to be multiple components and multiple pieces to this technology and to this platform, and having a key site and a key eye towards how are you going to integrate this so that this is usable and stable in the near and the long term. But this is a hard question, and I think we have the best people in the room to address these challenges. Last but not the least, it's the people in the room and the people outside this room who are going to make this vision a reality are going to be really, really key. We understand that the researchers in this room are going to be responsible for the innovation, for the vision, for the ideas, for the feasibility of the technologies that will become commercial successes as NSF is envisioned for power. We understand you're not the people who are going to keep this operational. We understand you're not the people who are going to maybe build this, do the day-to-day operations, do the maintenance. So what I want to stress here is as you're going and forming teams, it is really important to have key personnel who have that expertise, who have that interest, and basically work on sort of collaborating really closely and having them as important people who have a say in this process. The one key thing is the earlier you think about the operational staff, it actually plays really well into the sustainability of the platform, because these are the people who actually are going to be the lead users of your platform. You are the innovator, you are the researcher, you're going to have to work hand in hand with this operational staff. And this sort of can be a model that can be envisioned. And again, I think creativity is going to be key here. And I think the people in this room are obviously there. So I haven't seen anything been thrown at me, so I'm going to quickly get off the stage while I can. It's my great pleasure to introduce Bill Wallace, who's going to be introducing the RFP requirements and what we've published recently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manu. I wanted to echo something Tommaso said, and that is that our colleagues at Northeastern University have been the world's best partners in working with us and setting this up. Sometimes this doesn't work as smoothly, but our partnership has been outstanding from day one that we've started working together. So thank you for all your hard work in that regard, and thank you again for everyone being here. I'm going to cover some of the nitty-gritty of the RFP. I'm probably not going to cover too many things that are not in the official RFP that you've already seen either on our website or at the RFP 365 system for submitting the RFPs. But I'm just going to go over some things real fast. Expressions of intent to submit, not required. We'd love to have a sense of how many people are going to be applying. So by May 8th, if you could get that to us on the site, there's a link where you can let us know you're going to be submitting. Preliminary proposal, which I'll describe in more detail in a few minutes, due June 1st, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. A little different system than the RFP Fastlane system, so one time, not based on your time zone. Keep that in mind. Full proposals will be due if you've been passed on to the full proposal stage after the preliminary stage will be July 31st. Finalists announced sometime roughly by the end of October. Site visits to the final finalists during the latter part of 2017 with winners announced in early 2018. As Brian said, any questions about what I'm going to be describing, send them to the Twitter feed or send an email to power@us-ignite.org, and we'll make sure to get to your questions toward the end of the day today or during one of the more open-ended sessions. Eligibility, pretty straightforward. Either universities and colleges, which includes community colleges and other institutions of learning in the U.S., or an international entity that has campuses in the U.S., or nonprofit, non-academic institutions like governments, municipalities, municipally owned utilities, foundations, other education or economic development entities. Again, that's pretty well defined in the RFP. One proposal per organization. If we receive more, we'll not be able to handle that. Same thing with the project director / PI. We ask that you be a project director or PI on only one proposal. You may participate in other proposals, but we can only accept the first one we receive with you as a PI or project director. These are going to be strictly enforced as if we were an NSF enforcement agency to make sure that we are fair to everybody in that regard. Some people have asked about federally funded research and development centers. We encourage participation by FFRDCs, but the costs will need to be covered. And these are non-NSF funded FFRDCs. The costs for that participation will need to be funded by FFRDC itself or another federal agency, but not part of this funding source. I'm going to cover a few things overall on the project description. I think you've seen this, and I would just like to add to some of the things Tiago and Tommaso said. This is an opportunity for the U.S. to, in some cases, retain leadership, in some cases, sustain leadership in the wireless industry. And it's built from day one to be a bottom-up innovation as opposed to top-down. That's why there's $100 million of public-private partnership funds that are being made available for the platforms for success and innovation to occur from bottom up. This is not a large government program with a top-down definition of what innovation is or what applications and services ought to be focused on. Manu will be covering some of this project design in more detail than I will. I wanted to just touch on a few items focused on diversity. We're not required to focus on one technology area. We expect to see an overall community commitment, not just a single player. You'll see a lot of theme here, a strong theme about teaming across the community. Manu will talk about IRB elements that should be considered. And finally, obviously, we're hoping for very novel solutions and research that will occur over the next 6 to 9 year period. You'll see when we talk about vision, technical merit, we're looking for not just the technology per se, but also the applications and end users that will be facilitated through this research. So your proposals will be enhanced if you're talking about ultimate uses for these platforms. You may not be able to predict exactly what it's going to be, but same general zip code. We're going to be focusing in on autonomous vehicles or smart grid or public safety of some kind or other. It's important to be moving in that direction. I think my colleague Tommaso will talk about that in more detail. In terms of deployment, this is really something for the full proposal phase, so we don't need this by June 1st. This is the Project Development Plan, or PDP, Platform Development Plan. It'll be somewhat detailed during the full proposal phase, but then for those who pass into the final phase, it'll be a more detailed platform development plan, due dates, locations of sites, permitting, optimizing end-to-end value so that the whole community is involved. And as Manu described, there will be very specified definitions if you proceed to the full proposal phase of what the platform development plan will look like, and then even more detail if you move to the site visit stage, which is the final stage that will occur between October and December. For now, though, this is for your information, is not required by June 1st. Similarly, the operations phase, we expect you to mention it in your initial Gantt, perhaps in a preliminary implementation phase, part of the preliminary proposal, but the details of a project operations plan, or POP, won't be required until the very, very end at the site visit stage. This is listing out all of the operations plan for ensuring sustainability of your platform going forward. And as Tommaso described, this is a very important review criteria that we're all going to be looking at carefully. I'm going to talk about award information, again, directly from the RFP, 3 years, $20 million per proposer on average. Probably up to two proposals during this first phase. You may ask why, if it's a $100 million project and there'll be ultimately 4 platforms, why it's $20 million. We're using that as an average because in some cases the industry in-kind contributions, there'll be some debate about the market value of those contributions. So we're giving ourselves and you some flexibility. We expect you to budget in the full proposal phase, not now, full proposal phase, budget using retail costs for equipment and services. And then you'll get to more detail at various stages as you proceed as winners toward the final proposal stage. But in this case, assume an average of $20 million. We're requesting for budgets in the full proposal stage, which will be not more than $20 million, recognizing that the ultimate award may be higher or lower depending upon where we end up in the in-kind contributions valuation. Okay? Proposal requirements. On your left, the preliminary proposal sections are limited. And the first 6 sections correspond directly to the 6 merit review criteria that we'll discuss in a bit. Starting with vision and technical merit, it's 8 pages required for the project description by June 1st. 2 pages on vision and technical merit, 2 pages on research community engagement, 2 pages on community engagement, up to half a page, 350 words for alignment with the power vision that Tommaso described, up to 1 page on the preliminary implementation plan, high level, and then up to half a page on the preliminary sustainability plan. Obviously, in 8 pages, we're not asking for a lot of detail. We're asking you to give some thought to each of these 6 very important merit review criteria, okay? And then to describe your team qualifications. We've asked for a 2-page max in terms of qualifications for the director, project PI rather, and then for each of the first 3 co-PIs or senior personnel. If you have more than 3 co-PIs / senior personnel, please list them in the team qualifications, but we do not need further definitions of their capabilities other than just this 2-pagers for the first, with the PI and for the 3 proposers. Moving to the right of this page, sorry, it's a bit of an eye chart, but it's, again, all on the RFP. The full proposal has the same, in this case it's 7 categories because we split platform vision and technical merit into 2 categories. But the first bullets, which are 7, correspond directly to the merit review criteria in the RFP with pages laid out. In addition, when we reach the July 31st deadline for full proposals, you'll be asked to provide a risk mitigation plan, a management plan, contributions of key personnel, and then the other supplemental and other information. These will be defined in the system, so you don't need to worry about knowing exactly what needs to be in there. And let me just define what I mean. This is the RFP 365 system, which you've each registered for if you've gone in there. I think Bill, you said 80, 88, something like that, of you have already started the process. Between now and June 1st, focus on the far left sections. There are 2 through 9 sections, sections 2 through 9, okay? And those are the only PDFs we will need you to upload in this preliminary phase. The first 2 is really just asking for some registration information. Again, you've registered to get into the system, but this is just asking for a little bit additional information. 3 corresponds to merit review criteria number 1, vision and technical merit. 3 through 9, the other through 9 covers the other elements of the project description. And then section 9, is the team qualifications. So in each case, the page numbers have been well defined as either 1, 2, or half a page. And for the preliminary proposal, we just need that left section filled out. If you proceed to the full proposal stage, we will then put in the system new requirements for the full proposal. For now, just focus in on these, okay? And then finally, our favorite topic, cost sharing. This relates to contributions that the proposers can make. And the official wording is that voluntary, committed cost sharing is prohibited, okay? What we do encourage is that for communities that are participating in the proposals and contributing resources like backhaul, like tower space, like permitting and expediting of procedures to get towers or space up and running, we encourage you to include those in your proposals at the full proposal stage, or you can allude to them in the preliminary proposal phase. But in the full proposal stage, we expect those to go into what a section called facilities, equipment, and other resources, not in the budget. The budget section will just include your estimates at full proposal stage of retail value for equipment and services that are going to be required for your proposals. Again, we will provide more detail as you proceed into the full proposal phase and then into the site visit stage. There's an appendix in the RFP, Appendix 3, which lists the contributions at a very high level from the industry consortium. And as Tiago said, there's $50 million of cash coming into this from NSF and $50 million of in-kind and cash coming from the industry consortium. There's a very high-level description of what industry is offering, and you know there are going to be radios, and there's going to be backhaul, and there's going to be other kinds of things you need to do to put up a platform. At this point, we want you to use the range of in-kind that are being contributed, but don't feel constrained. If you have an SDR radio that's not available, don't feel like you have to use one that's available in the market today. Estimate what you're going to need and put that into your proposal, okay? Manu will describe that in more detail as we get going. But it's important that you take a look at Appendix 3 to know what kinds of things are coming from companies like NI, Crown, and InterDigital, and the other, up to, I think we're close to 28 members now of the industry consortium and growing, as Tiago said, okay? When we get to the final proposal stage, just for clarification, not to be worried about between now and the preliminary proposal stage, there'll be 3 parts to the final proposal award. There'll be one covering facilities, equipment, and other resources. That's where you will put community contributions of things like backhaul, tower, permitting processes, and so on, as well as the in-kind industry contributions. There will be a formal budgeting process, which is going to be NSF-funded funds with negotiated indirect costs that the universities and others have. And then finally, a third category that will be budgeting for cash coming from the industry consortium. But again, that's going to be very well specified when you reach the full proposal stage, and then even more well specified when you reach the site visit stage. Mention facilities, just to give you an example of the kind of things that will help make strong proposals. We like the idea of R&D facilities, backhaul, deployment sites, power supply, operations support, any capabilities needed to expedite permitting. I think one of the things are, if you were to ask any member of the 28 industry consortium members, what do they most worry about here? And it's, once we have a design, can we get it deployed fast enough? And will the communities who are working with us help expedite that process? Okay. Any other community facilities that could be contributed creatively will go in this facilities section in the full proposal stage. I'm sure you probably have a number of questions. Thank you for saving them until the Q&A period so we can get through this. But I'm going to turn it back over to my colleague Tommaso Melodia to wrap us up on this section. Thank you.
Hello again. So we're going to talk a little bit about the review and selection process and the review criteria that will be used by the PPO. So first of all, as I'm sure everyone knows by now, there's going to be preliminary proposals due June 1st. The PPO team will conduct an internal review process. Okay, so the proposal will be reviewed internally by the PPO, and this will result in in an outcome that will be encourage or discourage of submission of a full proposal. Okay, so even if you get a discourage outcome, you are allowed to submit a full proposal. We're just, in a sense, discouraging that. And obviously, the reason for that is to, I mean, I'm sure many people in this room have spent entire summers working on unsuccessful proposals. And, if we give a discourage recommendation, what we're trying to say is we do not think that this can be made into a successful proposal in 2 months or whatever time you have, okay? That's the general message that we want to give. Of course, if you're free to submit a full proposal after that if you want to. Full proposals will be reviewed by an external review panel. Okay, so the review panel will be based on well-established NSF merit review procedures. So there will be panelists taken from academia, from industry, from local communities, and from the government sector. So it will be a diverse panel. The names of the panelists will not be released outside of the PPO. And the proposals will be assigned, the full proposal will be assigned to panelists based on the area of expertise, and then there will be an in-person panel that will discuss the proposals, based on which we expect that the panel will provide a recommendation to the program director, okay, and the program director will then put forward the site visits for the finalists, okay. And then based on the site visits, a recommendation for funding will be made by the PPO to NSF and the industry consortium. There will be a stage after submission of the full proposal, after the finalists have been selected, during which site visits will be organized by the PPO to further discuss with the potential awardees the status of their proposals. During these site visits, we expect that there will be detailed technical negotiations. Okay? And what this means is that the potential awardees will discuss the technical needs of the platforms with the PPO, okay? And there will be matching between the requests of the potential awardees and the contribution from the industry consortium. This will be discussed in more detail and in specifics later by Manu, I believe. And then there will be awards to be made at the beginning of 2018. Now, what will be the merit review criteria? Okay, the merit review criteria, number one, it will be vision and technical merit. Okay, we will be asking some of these questions, and I want to emphasize you don't have to answer all of these questions. Okay, it's not like you have to explicitly answer all of these questions. You can pick and choose, but these are the things that we'll be looking for. Okay. So is the research, and I'm going to read just because language is important here, so we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page and understands. Is the research platform focused on disruptive, transformative technologies and applications instead of incremental approaches? Is the platform design well motivated? Do the proposals demonstrate awareness of existing academic and industry test beds? If so, does the platform complement such existing test beds? Is the platform development plan technically sound? This is obviously going to be specifically looked at for full proposals, right? So we don't, Bill talked clearly about what we expect at the level of preliminary proposals. So this is vision and technical merit. Point number two is we're going to be looking at the research community, okay? Does the plan show commitment and evidence of capability to attract a broad and diverse group of academic and industry researchers in both the short and long term? So after all, we want these platforms to be used for research, and we want to see some evidence that the proposers know how to create a community of people that will use these platforms? Is there broad research community support for the proposed platform? Who are the early users? Will new transformative research be uniquely enabled by the proposed platform? Is this adding something new in terms of capabilities of enabling research? Does the platform balance the competing needs of short-term versus long-term research of industry and academic researchers? Okay. We understand that industry may have a focus on short-term results, and that academics will want to see results coming out on longer term. Okay? Is this balanced somehow in the platform? Community engagement. Is there close alignment with community and other local stakeholders? Okay? In Power Platforms, the participation of local communities is important, is a key aspect. Is there a detailed plan for regular coordination with key stakeholders? Of course, these things will become more important as we progress through the process, right? Less so during the preliminary proposal phase. At the level of site visits, we will want to see very detailed plans. Is the power deployment connected to the broader innovation and economic development organizations and plans for the proposed region? Does the platform development plan leverage local support for deployment and operations? Is there contributed value from the local communities? Merit review criteria number 4 is alignment with Power vision, and this is basically what I discussed earlier on. Okay? We want to see reproducibility, usability, interoperability, programmability, open access, and diversity. Are these spelled out in the proposal? Implementation plan is number 5. Does the project team have the right expertise and experience to implement the vision as well as details of the research platform? Okay. Of course, we don't want to see all expertise in all PIs, but as a team, we want to see the necessary experience. Does the proposing team have a track record of operating experimental testbeds that can help assess their ability to manage the project? Does the plan follow the timeline suggested by the PPO? So there should be sites operational as soon as possible, okay? And the entire platform should be fully operational within 3 years. So we want to see an incremental deployment plan. Is a deployment plan feasible with clearly designed goals, timelines, and deliverables? And last, sustainability. Are there long-term plans to evolve the platform beyond the 5 years of initial operations? Is the operational model sound? Is it financially sustainable? And how will research on the platform be funded? Okay. Again, these aspects will become more important in the full proposal rather than in the preliminary proposal. Okay. So together we want to achieve fundamental research breakthroughs similar to what has been accomplished in past successes, and these are a few examples. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Walter Johnston. Walter is the chief of the Electromagnetic Compatibility Division of the FCC's Office of Engineering Technology. And, oh, okay, great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to be talking about a new form of experimental license that the FCC has recently approved and is actually made available to the public now. I'm going to assume most of you already know what an experimental license is, but for those of you who might not, an experimental license allows a researcher or developer to either operate outside the service rules that have been established for use of radio devices. So you might operate at higher power levels, you might operate in spectrum areas or wider spectrum that you would otherwise normally be allowed to do under our rules, or it allows you to use spectrum that you would not otherwise be entitled to use. And it's safe to say that every innovation, every RF innovation at some point in time has probably used an experimental license. And we recognize it as a very important part of the innovation process. FCC spectrum management, we actually define the rules for commercial use of spectrum. It involves things like power limits, spectral mask, areas of permitted operations, permitted services. And as I noted earlier, there's two broad classes of spectrum use. You have licensed use, where you get a license to use the spectrum, and the license contains specific conditions for use. And we have something called unlicensed use of spectrum, where, again, if you follow the rules, you don't have to apply for a license, but Wi-Fi, for example, you can build a Wi-Fi device, get it certified. You don't need a license for operation for that device. And we have a bureau within the FCC that actually enforces the proper use of spectrum. So if somebody is a rogue user or there's a bad piece of equipment out there, we have a bureau that goes after that. That's actually a rare event, and that's the point I want to emphasize. We have an incredible number of wireless devices in use today. The number proportionately of complaints we have for inappropriate use is very, very small. And in terms of experimental licenses, I could count on one crippled hand the number of complaints I've had in the last 5 years. So we have a very efficient regulatory environment and allowing people to either use spectrum for commercial purposes or for experimental licenses for innovative purposes. But our goal is to support innovation, and we receive advice on innovation issues from various sources. We have various technical committees, advisory groups that report into the FCC. We coordinate with national and international regulatory bodies. We have frequent meetings with industry representatives and a number of public proceedings. So we try to take input from the public in terms of what's working, what's not working, how can we make things better. And our goal really is, especially in my division, because I manage experimental licenses, is to support innovation. And these discussions can lead to policy changes, regulatory rule changes, new spectrum allocations. The recent millimeter wave allocations that the FCC undertook directly resulted from discussions we had with industry and a growing recognition on our part that we needed to move very fast in this area. And historically, as I noted, an important foundation for innovation has been the experimental license. Okay, we issue 2,000 experimental licenses every year. I'm doing that currently with half the staff I had about 5 years ago. It's becoming ever more challenging. We actually have a higher number of applications. We probably have about 2,500 applications. We issue, I think actually this year we issued 2,200 licenses in 2016. And it's growing at about 15% a year. So we're reaching a point of diminishing returns. Experimental licenses allow you to do things you wouldn't otherwise be allowed to do. And that's the point of innovation, stepping outside the box and experimenting with new technologies, new power levels, new devices. And its purpose really of experimental license is to promote innovation and research. And there's a tussle in the industry. We have industry groups come in and say, you know, we're issuing too many licenses, or we have to be more restrictive. We've had specific one-on-ones with companies arguing against experimental licenses in their case. And we've taken an advocacy role in allowing experimental licenses because it really is where everything begins. The process is fairly structured. You apply for an experimental license through a system we maintain. You describe the purpose and the operational characteristics, what power levels, what frequencies you're going to operate at. And we coordinate that application with FCC bureaus and offices responsible for existing commercial license stakeholders and with the NTIA if there are federal frequencies involved. So if you want to operate on, say, on a cellular frequency, we coordinate that with the Wireless Bureau, another bureau within the FCC, who's responsible for wireless licenses such as cellular licenses. If you want to operate on specific satellite frequencies, we have an international bureau responsible for that. If you want to operate on federal frequencies, the NTIA is responsible for federal frequencies. So we have a coordination process where we take an experimental license, decide whether or not it's going to interfere with normal operations, and providing it's not, we will grant it. We grant licenses for periods of 6 months, 2 years, and 5 years, although we're starting to push back on 5-year licenses. And we often attach conditions to ensure minimal impact. The license can't cause harmful interference to commercial or federal license holders. So if you want to operate on cellular frequencies in downtown Manhattan, you probably won't get your license. Unless you're working. There are exceptions. Unless you're working, say, with the cellular company that's a license holder for that. Licenses can be canceled at any time by the FCC. So if we have a complaint and we judge the complaint valid, we can take the license away. And the licenses only take on average 4 to 6 weeks, although my people are telling me it's verging more on the 6 weeks than the 4 weeks because, again, we're doing this with shorter staff. Our goal is not to impede the license itself. We don't try to judge the innovation. Sometimes we have people come in and they have what we think are crazy ideas and they fail. Sometimes people come in and we think they have crazy ideas and they succeed wonderfully. We make no judgment on the commercial viability of the proposal. Our objective is only to grant a license unless it's precluded otherwise. We really try to work, and sometimes we've spent months granting an experimental license where we think it's had value. Probably the most complex one I did in the last 5 years was to help a researcher use a radar system to measure polar ice caps. And because they were flying over a wide swath and they were using federal frequencies, we spent a huge amount of time working with the NTIA and the Navy to ensure that they could do this in a way that wouldn't impact anybody but would still get the work done. Our main criteria is, again, interference. As long as we're sure that the service won't interfere with anybody, we grant it. And we've had, like I said, a wonderful track record. I'm not exaggerating when I say that in 5 years, even if I had a crippled hand, I could still count the number of valid complaints we've had. And again, all radio technology and service developed in the U.S. have probably benefited from an experimental license. We work with all the major companies. We work with startups. I can't think of an innovation that I've been aware of in the last 5 years that hasn't, at some point in the innovation process, relied upon an experimental license. Having said all that, we started thinking of, a number of years ago, of ways we could improve the process. For one thing, each experiment you do requires its own license. So every license you file, no matter, you make a change, and we have to go through the coordination process again. That's 4 to 6 weeks. Many experiments equals many licenses. Some institutions, and predominantly universities, may not be familiar with the application process and may lack the knowledge due to fluidity of staff. Although the junior researchers are generally given the task for filing a license, and they adapt very well. So I've been very impressed when we've had to work with universities that at least the graduate students seem to know more about the process than the lead researchers. But the real issue is that there's a front end and a back end to the process. When we grant an experimental license, we can clear that with 4 to 6 weeks. But we often attach a safety valve on the license or seek consent of the license holder. Okay, you have to seek consent requires an applicant to obtain the consent of the license holder before operation. That ensures the protection of the license holder, and it's a common condition applied. Consent cannot be withheld without cause, however, and in certain instances, we've gotten into very lengthy arbitration processes to arrive at a conclusion where a license is granted. However, it can be a significant burden to identify, communicate, and negotiate with partners to obtain consent. So once you get your license, if there's a consent requirement or a coordination requirement, you have to then start down a trail of identifying who are the license holders that might be impacted. You have to contact them. You have to get their attention. You have to schedule meetings with them. You have to coordinate with them. Normally that process works well. Most companies in the business of holding licenses understand the principle of an experimental license, and I'd say the vast majority of these things occur without friction from the license holder. It still takes time. A very small percentage of them, the license holder is unreasonable, doesn't see value in it for them, withholds consent, wants fees, wants money, and we get involved at that point, and that is a very treacherous process. What we started to do about 2 or 3 years, actually 4 years ago now, is define a license to support the needs of R&D programs. What we started to believe is that there are serial innovators, that there are people, institutions, they can include universities, they can include manufacturers of R&D, of radio equipment that are continually in the business of innovating and continually requiring licenses. And we look for a way to streamline the process for them that would be to their benefit. The program license was developed to grant a general authority to conduct experiments in a defined geographic area. The principle here was we noticed that many institutions do a lot of their innovation in fixed localities that they control. This could be a university campus, it could be a test site for a company, but it's a restricted environment that they exercise control over in terms of who's allowed on the property, who's not allowed on the property. And we decided that we wanted to streamline the cases where people are in the business of innovation, where they own facilities that they control, and where they want to do experiments on their own property. So, and the requirement then in this case is that specific experiments must be described and posted on a program license website that we made available April 14th of this year. And the website allows inspection by the public and automatic notification should stakeholders want to trigger on experimental characteristics to interested parties. So, for example, a cellular company could say, I own a 900 megahertz license, I own an 800 megahertz license. If anybody files an 800 megahertz in this territory, could be the entire United States, I want to get notified about that. And if no objection is received within 10 days, if it's a commercial spectrum, or 15 days if it's federal spectrum, then they're authorized to proceed. The real issue here is we've changed the paradigm, where you had to seek consent of a license holder with an experimental license. Now you basically post, and the obligation shifts to the stakeholder to be watchful and to object for cause if there's a concern. And there's a requirement to report on the experiment, including any interference incidents, within 30 days of the experiment termination. Now, the benefits of this, we think, are significant. There's lower overhead per experimental application. Instead of going through a filing process and waiting 4 to 6 weeks, and then having, if you're successful, having the grant going back to a licensed stakeholder, contacting them, finding out who in the company you got to contact, get them available, set up a meeting to coordinate frequencies. You simply post what you want to do on the website, you wait 10 or 15 days, and if nobody objects, you're good to go. Potentially affected licensed parties must self-identify, so now the obligation shifted that they have to self-identify and file an objection for cause. Okay. What remains out of this process, however, is still an obligation to avoid creation of harmful interference. So even though you're doing this on your property, even though you're doing this in an environment you control, you still have an obligation not to interfere with other licensed stakeholders. You're the low person on the totem pole. Okay. Any interference is harmful interference, okay, and must cease. And you also have an obligation to accept interference from other authorized operations. So you can't come to us and say, Verizon is interfering with my experiment. Verizon is a licensed stakeholder. Okay, so those obligations remain. Who's eligible for an experimental license? The real focus when we started thinking about this, and it was colleges or universities. We really were struggling to make life easier for colleges and universities with a graduate research program. But we also, as we started thinking about this, included research laboratories, hospitals or healthcare institutions, and manufacturers of radio frequency equipment, or a manufacturer that integrates radio frequency equipment into its end product. Anybody who basically has to test radio equipment and does it on an ongoing basis. Okay, the obligations of this new license, and I think I've touched the highlights here, but you got to conduct it in a defined geographic area. The applicant has institutional processes to monitor and effectively manage a wide variety of research projects. The applicant has demonstrated expertise in radio spectrum. We're not looking for home hobbyists, although we've actually had inquiries from home hobbyists whether they could apply for this license. And they must specify a geographic area that is inclusive of institutions' real property facilities where the experiment will be conducted and that is under the applicant's control. We've already turned down informally a request for somebody to send up a satellite and use this license, and we noted that the control aspect wasn't going to be there. Okay. But I'm joking, but we're still feeling, my point is, this is a new license, and people are asking very basic questions. Some of them we have good answers to, some of them we're still working our way through. But the intent is to lower the barrier for innovation. Okay. The program license is also not permitted in specific instances when an environmental assessment must be filed, when orbital debris mitigation plans must be filed, when the applicant requests non-disclosure of proprietary information. One of the things you can do in an experimental license, and it's very, very common today, in today's environment, is somebody will file for an experimental license. They have to describe why they want to do it, what the application is. But they'll say the application or the equipment type or the operations or the scale of the experiment is confidential business information, and we will protect that within the limits of our protection. We can treat it as confidential information. It's still FOIAble, Freedom of Information Act, although that's a rare event, and in my experience, it hasn't happened. But if you need that sort of non-disclosure, then it's not appropriate for a program license, and the existing licenses are still available. So you have the existing process, has not been removed, it's still available, and the experimental license can be applied for, either an STA or a 2-year license. If you're going to do a product development or a market trial to be conducted, so in other words, market trials are excluded from this, but you still have all the regular options that have existed in the past. We also came up with some variants on the program experimental license. The basic structure is the same, but we realized that the environments are a little bit different. We have something called a medical testing experimental license. The differences here are market trials in this case are permitted. That's a very common. When we talk to people in the medical field, they emphasize this was a needed application. And we went to yearly reporting because these tend to be longer-term trials. They're not testing RF equipment. They're testing RF equipment in the context of some medical function or operation, and you don't get that on a monthly basis. That's a much longer-term effort. And the other thing we talked about was something called an innovation zone, which, frankly, we're still looking at in terms of what the hell that means. An innovation zone we know is going to be a specified geographic location. With pre-authorized boundary conditions. It can be created by the Commission on its own initiative or in response to a request from the public. We'll announce what an innovation zone is by a public notice and post on the Commission's Program Experimental Registration website. And the stimulus here was the concept of a model city. We recognized that there is a need for testing in situ within a city environment, within not necessarily always a city. One of the proposals that's been pushed around is a drone testing area that you'd have complete freedom to do different types of RF experiments in a drone testing environment. And there are other applications that people have proposed, but we've recognized in addition to having an institution own or control the space, there's some shareable common space that multiple innovators might want access to and might be beneficial under certain circumstances. Innovation zone participants must still have a program license to participate. All conditions of the program license apply. And experiments must be consistent with the boundary conditions defined for innovation zones. Now, we have defined and issued 2 program licenses. We tested our system in beta testing with 2 universities, NYU Tandon School of Engineering and University of Colorado at Boulder. And since both of those were expert in filing, they were actually the first filers to file for a program license, and we granted them a program license based upon their campus contours. Okay, we haven't approached an innovation zone yet. There's going to be more complexity in terms of what type of experiments, where the spectrum is, what are the bounding points, who are the stakeholders in an innovation zone. The stakeholder in a program license is the innovator, the researcher, the university, the manufacturer. Who are the key stakeholders when you look at an innovation zone? These are all things we hope to work out, maybe ahead of the problem, working with the NSF, who's first at our doorstep with this concept, and trying to understand how we describe an innovation zone that both allows innovation as well as protects licensed stakeholders in the area. We put out the rules for the program license about 4 years ago. We needed funding to build a website. I won't go into the horrors of the IT development of the website, but it took us a fair amount of time to go with the website up and running. We put out a public notice on the 14th of April. There's a link to the public notice on the slide. We've had 2 applications. We've had a whole number of inquiries. We've got a couple of filings already in the way. We think if you're a manufacturer, if you're what I'll call a serial innovator, this is a huge, significant advancement in terms of what we offered to you in the past. And we've done this in the hope of lowering the bounds for people doing innovative things within this country. All right, thank you. Sure.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank Walter, and I just want to emphasize the fact, Walter, if you could stick around for maybe a couple, we'll do a couple of Q&As, but I just wanted to emphasize the fact that power is not going to be power without the help and support from the FCC and other governmental agencies, and I think it was really important for people in this room to understand that process. Now, it looks, I mean, even though it's been streamlined, there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm standing up here to say that the PPO is here to help. Appendix 2 sort of briefly touches upon these processes and the ideas of the websites are live. You can go and actually, for your proposed locations, can actually try and draw the geographical area on this really neat interface and submit those applications to understand the feasibility for the spectrums that you're looking to open up. And again, I'm just here to emphasize, PPO is here to help. We're here today, we're here through the process, and as we get to the full proposal stage, we'll continue to get this process going. So I'd like to open up the floor for Walter, specifically for any spectrum-related questions, just 1 or 2, if there are any comments. Okay, perfect. Oh.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lillian Bruce with EPB, and I'm not sure if I saw this, but I think I saw something that perhaps excluded municipalities from participating. Is the innovation zone kind of the workaround, or is it just universities that can apply for the sort of the program?
To hold the municipality would not explicitly be allowed to have a program license. You could define a municipality as an innovation zone, but the requirement for the program license is that you either be a university, a R&D manufacturer with demonstrated RF expertise, and I don't think the administrative unit of a municipality would fulfill that. So the vision we had was that we could include, say, a smart city footprint as an innovation zone, and then the researchers themselves would apply for the program license.
Okay, going once. Okay, so thank you, Walter. Thank you very much. So at this point, I think we're going to open up the floor to any general questions about the RFP process, what you've heard so far this morning. I know there's a lot of information to absorb. Any questions that you'd like to bring up to the PPO at this point, we'd be happy to take. Walter.
Good morning. Thanks for the information so far. Walt Magnuson, Texas A&M University. And when you're looking at the, in the proposals, you're looking at ballparking about 20 sites. Is there any idea as to how close the proximity of those 20 sites would be ideally if you wanted to distribute them, let's say even over across a couple of universities or cities? Is there a pro or a con on something like that?
Great question. So we'll touch a little bit upon this in the technical discussion at 2:30. And again, all the questions that we're being asked here, we're going to archive it. The process here is that we want to get all the information out to the community members. So every information that we collect here and the answers that we give, we are going to be posting FAQs on the advancedwireless.org website. So I'll take the latter part of the question about deployment sites and geographical separation. I think the key point here is for the PPO when issuing the RFP was not to be prescriptive in terms of defining lat long or range estimates. The idea was for topological significance. So the idea is that you need to enable topologies that researchers will want to use. And this is where users come in. So it's sort of a complicated ecosystem that you have to think about. But we also understand that you work under the constraints of access to locations. This would be something that, again, you're going to have to balance that trade-off of where those sites are located. And we've given an example in the RFP where we also talk about the focus area which you're going to focus on. So if it is low-powered IoT kind of solutions, you might want to be very, very dense because you might want an indoor area or a very, very small outdoor area. But if you're doing something where you're trying to do mobility over different spectrum areas, then you might have geographical separation, and that would be feasible. But again, all of this stuff needs to be clearly articulated and documented. There is no prescribed or prescription that the PPO is issuing at this stage. Thank you.
So,
Suman. Oh, we got a question in the back. Suman.
Two questions. One's related to team formation. So I'm guessing obviously industry partners in these projects would probably be beneficial. And for, say, a company that's willing to work with a university and a city team that has never applied for, say, NSF or federal funding, will they have to go through the usual overheads process? Is that sort of something they have to get approved, or will it be like more of a sub-award, or is it a collaborative? I mean, that's sort of perhaps the question. That's the first one.
Yeah, for local companies that are not members of the industry consortium who want to participate.
Yes.
Tiaga, they could be sub-awards. Where are you, Tiaga? Yeah, sub-awards
So
would be part of it. Non-cooperative, yeah.
Okay. The other question is, do you anticipate any a city-scale deployment where it could be multiple islands that are not directly connected to each other? Would that be meaningful?
Right. So again, what I previously stated, it depends on what sort of research focus area are we, is the proposal addressing. So I think when the evaluation criteria that we're looking at for the vision and technical merit, the idea here is that if you have a technology that requires geographical separation, you could absolutely think of it. You can also think of, for purposes of, because you have to do compliance with FCC and you have program experimental licenses, have multiple islands which could be geographically separated for different kinds of testing. So if you have access to areas where there is Wild West, where you have large availability of spectrum, versus a different area where you might not have that availability, that's feasible. But again, this stuff needs to be explained and articulated, and obviously going through that FCC process. The one thing I didn't mention is in the RFP, it's Appendix 2, where we have the links to the presentation that Walter just made, and that actually directs you to the website, which is live. And this is something that I highly encourage proposers to actually investigate of what spectrum is available in the areas that they're beginning to consider.
over here.
Oh,
Okay, this is Ted Lair with the City of Austin. I'm going to beat on this question of geography again, just to get one more angle on it. You talked about maybe the different types of experiments could be done in different geographies, Wild West or an urban center, for example. How about the staging of experiments? You might have a place that has a light touch, meaning the overhead, let's say in an urban environment, the overhead might be a little higher to get the approvals, where in a smaller place, smaller community, it's quick. and you can learn from that and take it to the urban center? Is that a...
That's absolutely spot on. So the idea for deployments and experimentation is basically
Okay.
incremental modular, and that approach absolutely is completely feasible.
Okay, and just one other question. Does the program prohibit collaboration or advice from international cities? For example, there are cities around the country, around the world that have been platforms.
It's
And-
as you saw earlier today, James brought up the Bristol Open Programmable City. It's an open project, and that's something that it's absolute highly
Okay,
encouraged.
thank you.
Please. Oh yeah.
I want to clarify the comment about sub-awards to companies. So remember, NSF is not in the business of giving money out to for-profit institutions. If a company, you can always purchase the equipment from a company, and you can allocate the budget towards purchasing equipment if a small company wants to contribute something, and you need to, of course, clearly justify why you need that equipment. But otherwise, we would not be directly in the business of giving any specific sub-awards. Now, if the company has a unique service that only that company can provide in your context, then you can justify that service or specific, other whatever services you may want. But otherwise, we're not in the business of giving money directly. So it has to be, if it's equipment, you can buy that equipment, you can budget it in the proposal. If they are contributing, of course, there's no need to say anything, right? But if they are providing specific services, you have to justify why it's unique and why does it justify you giving a sub-award for that particular company. But it's possible, but it has to be unique.
We got a question in the back. We have mics right there.
How soon after the June 1st deadline will you make the encourage-discourage decision? And the follow-up question to that is, can the team composition change between your pre-proposal and your final proposal?
Yes, so the first part is 14 days. You'll receive an encourage-discourage. And the second part is absolutely yes. We understand personnel, that's the most fickle part of the team composition, but the idea is to see if the skill set exists. So if you've lost some key personnel who is an RF wireless expert, if that person has been replaced by that same expertise. But again, we will ask for that justification, and it needs to be clearly articulated if you do make it to the full proposal stage. Oh, one more.
Hi. So I have a question regarding the implementation aspect of proposal. Conceptually, I think at some point, supposedly you have a vision about what the test bed should be, and part of the implementation would be probably related to deployment and other things, which would be more suitable for being done, something that can be done by commercial companies instead of research institutions. Mm-hmm. So for those kind of activities, especially in the implementation aspect, is each team required to worry about it individually, or do we have programs kind of wide probably support that you can rely on even in the process of preparing the proposal?
So I think we will discuss this internally. I think that's a great question. We will address this in the FAQ. At this point, I highly encourage you to look at industry consortium members who have that expertise. You heard today from Rebecca and Crown Castle. I encourage you, the proposers, to reach out to industry participants to understand what sort of expertise is available. We have multiple companies that actually are on the consortium that are in this business, and they have made contributions to the power program, which will actually directly be beneficial to proposers as they think of such ideas. We got a comment.
So I just want to clarify once again, you should proceed with as if you are going to do everything.
Yes.
I mean, your team is going to do everything. You're going to installation services, deployment operations, you have to decide that. And then if we do get selected and make it to the next phase, then the actual pairing will happen. So let's say, for example, you may say, I am going to recruit this local company to hire this kind of backhaul bandwidth to deploy this fiber services, whatnot. And if then the PPO may come and say, by the way, you may not need those services because here we have a company from the industry consortium who's willing to do this for you, and we could swap in those features and put this thing in place. Right? So you are preparing a proposal at this time for the full proposal phase. Plan as if you are going to do everything on your own. And then we'll swap out things when you get to the next levels.
Oh, yeah.
sort of an immediate follow. Dennis Roberson from Illinois Institute of Technology. You've described the case of the pairing after the fact. Is it advantageous to do that pairing up front? Since I think there is a lot of question actually about the 28 companies that are involved and how to engage or not engage those companies in the actual proposal process. So if you could elaborate on how to think about that both in the preliminary and later stages, that would, I think, be very helpful, probably not only to the proposers, but also, in my experience, to some of the companies that are part of the 28.
That's a great question. What we'll do is we'll defer it for now, but we'll make sure that the guidelines are clearly published on the advancedwireless.org website as soon as we collate these questions. So great question, though. Thank you.
Okay, so Akbar Saeed from University of Wisconsin. I have a question about what Thiaga said as well, that technology changes quite rapidly. So there may be some aspects of technology that are not quite ready for deployment right now. How do we anticipate? Should we be budgeting for that right up front, or in the proposals, or is there? I see this 4 years or whatever time frame, right? Beyond that is going to be sustainable on their own. So how do we do that right now? Should we anticipate what is going to be, should be articulated in the proposal that we expect to develop something down the line and maybe before the deployment?
Yeah, so I think that's absolutely highly encouraged. The one thing that we might give, and this was again a point made earlier today, is the whole concept of modular deployments, modular development, and extensibility. That has to be baked into the architecture that you're thinking about, and that's going to be really, really the key. We understand that. That's the balance trade-off that we mentioned about innovation and stability. So that's something that you need to be thinking of from day one. Now, how that relates into the budget, those are specifics that we can take offline.
Hi, my name is Donna Kawasaki, and I'm from Texas. My question, and I have a preface before that, the World Health Care Organization ranks the United States as number 39 in the world. And there's many other countries that rank much higher than that. So my question is with regards to, I share your philosophy in terms of innovation and building a scalable solution and really making the world a better place. I don't want to have to worry that I'm going to lose a frequency in 6 months. So when I hear that a 5-year frequency, you're thinking about modifying that, I guess my question is, can we develop an infrastructure so that we can have that on a more sustainable basis, so that we as the teams can really focus on the innovation and the scalable solution, so that we can really leapfrog the United States from that 39 position with the World Health Organization to the top 5, the top 3. We have smart people here, and we need the help of the infrastructure in order for us to be brought together on the collaborative platform.
Yeah, well, I think, Tiago, you may want to chime in, but I think this is a discussion with the FCC, and is Walter still here?
Yep.
Yeah, Walter, my sense is, I don't want to answer for you, but if there's a project that's up and running and being very successful and fulfilling a health need in a community, you're open to continuing the license, program license? Yeah.
So let me
Yeah.
Walter, I'm just going to help clarify that question. The program licenses are going to be issued for experimentation purposes. So there's no understanding that there's going to be a commercial service that's going to be built on top. So the moment we think this is going to be a sustainable allocation that's needed, then you will have to go to the FCC and make a proper license allocation of some sort. You need to make this cannot be an experimental program anymore at that point. So it'll have to transit into something more that's permanent, right? And of course, one of the things I want to clarify about the program licenses is you want to apply for a program license to understand if there are hidden transmitters that you may not be aware of that might come in the way of your whole experimentation plan. You may think of you can do a experimentation plan between 700 to 2 megahertz to 2 gigahertz, but if you don't even know the plans, then you may need to try this, make sure that you are aware of these things. So Walter has a specific comment.
For both regular experimental licenses and program licenses, it doesn't matter. there's no commercial opportunity. So the licenses are not meant to support commercial operations. There are some narrow exceptions I'm not going to go into, but generally the idea is to prove a concept, not to build a business. So they're used for things that are not going to involve fees, payments in general, but to prove RF constructs.
Right. So I lived in Singapore for 5 years, and it's just that. So we have actually been able to fix Alzheimer's there, and what I've learned is that in order to show these clinical trials, it takes longer than 6 months. So even for proof of concept. So that's why I was just asking for a little bit of support to help the U.S. leapfrog, and so I completely understand in terms of the experimental platform. It's just that there are definitely applications that will take longer than 6 months, longer than a year. Hopefully they won't take 5 years, but at the same time, I just want to feel like your arms are wrapped around me and you're going to support the team in order to really help us get to the goal that we're trying to get to.
Experimental licenses themselves are renewable. So if you got a 2-year experimental license and you need to continue, you can go further than that under the constraints of what an experimental license is meant to support. So they're infinitely renewable as long as it's an experiment.
Okay. I think we had
a question. Rikin Tucker with Multicultural Media and Telecom Council. This actually goes back to some of the questions and the comment Tiaga made earlier. Program of this size and magnitude would require collaborations for sure. But when we said you come as if you are going to develop everything, you are going to do deployment and everything, I think it is expected that you work with the industry partners to actually do some collaboration. And in the requirements it says maximum number of co-PIs are 3. So is it preferred or is it actually required from PPO office that you work with any of these consortium members and bring one of their R&D folks into as a co-PI? Is it preferred or is it actually a requirement? Okay.
No. Any of the 28 industry consortium members are not permitted to be named in the proposals. Not. Okay. I mean, for the very reason that if they're named, it's going to be hard. They will play a role in the ultimate evaluation process, right? But as Tiaga said, assume that your platform, your team will be end-to-end responsible for everything, and then as we progress toward further finalists, we'll lay in additional capabilities that other folks may be able to provide.
Yeah. And then, just clarification for the number of co-PIs, that limit for 3 is just for the submission of qualifications. We don't want to be parsing at the preliminary stage through a lot of key personnel and co-PIs, so that limit is just artificial in terms of the qualification. Please make sure you list all the people who are going to be part of the proposal. Actually, this.
Hello? Oh, there we go. Hi, Nick Lanneman from Notre Dame. Quick follow-up question. So traditionally with an NSF proposal, there's a limit on co-PIs, and then you can incorporate senior personnel. Is there an explicit limit on co-PIs on these proposals?
No limit on co-PIs. It's just in the preliminary proposal phase, a limit on the number of resumes and descriptions, CVs we want to see.
Right, so we just brag about 3 of us.
Yeah, just brag about 3 of us. But you list, and the PI, but you can list the other ones
in the
team qualification.
That's very helpful.
Full proposal will move to regular bio sketches with as many as you need. Okay. And somebody asked me this, someone asked me this earlier, in terms of the team, and Tommaso touched on this. It's fair to say that if you're looking for a team leader, someone who has project management expertise is important. Okay, and the other members of the team would be research experts. I guess the specific question I received was, should we make the most prominent researcher the project director / PI? I said, no, I would find the capability that matches the needs of the project team. So lean towards somebody who has obviously some research experience, but also a significant amount of project management experience, if possible, should be on the team. Tommaso, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. But it's up really to the team of proposers to decide what expertise is to be the most prominent.
So actually my original question was regarding IP. So one thing I did not see covered in much detail, unless I just missed it in the RFP, was the issues of intellectual property, proprietary data versus community data, and et cetera. So I'm wondering if the PPO is going to provide guidance on that and at what stage.
Yeah, we will. In the other information link on the site, there's a description of IP treatment of NSF-funded research, and that's in the other information section, both on our the website and also at the RFP 365 site. We're still in discussions with the industry consortium about other elements of IP and trademark licensing treatment that'll be produced by the time the full proposal stages are accepted. So there'll be a whole description of all elements of the IP process.
So primarily after July?
Yes, no, after the June 1st. Between, okay.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, my name is Ashok Rao, and I'm from SES, Global Satellite Operator. It's a little open-ended question here. It's more about, we obviously want to make sure that satellites still remain relevant in a 5G world, especially for a large country like the US. And the question really is, how do we reach out to the bright people out here to kind of think of ideas about using other alternate forms of access?
So you're actually providing a great segue into what's going to happen in the next. We're going to take a couple more questions, but we're actually going to be having a teaming hour. The idea is we're going to have lightning talks led by our community director Bill McGuire and academic outreach director Kaushik Chaudhary. And you're going to hear from people from this room about what they're requiring and actually what they might be providing. So there's going to be that exchange over the next hour and a half. So please stick around for that.
Hi, I'm Rosa Zhen from Missouri, and I heard that there's a talk about the DARPA SC2 program, and I wonder how that program is related with this program.
There is no direct relation. It was a program that was highlighted by James Kimmery from National Instruments as part of a broad portfolio of projects they work on, so please feel free to connect with James.
One more here. This is Ted Lair from City of Boston again. Sorry to come up twice. I have a question about, a city has an interest in having a lot of the particular types of research done there. I mean, it's like maybe like whatever research you want almost, not quite, but the different universities, you said, well, maybe this is what we're going to focus on, this is what we're going to focus on. Can you give guidance on, like, to the city, to a city entity, the platform, if we can take all comers, or are we supposed to be more focused and pick our research topics? Do you understand what I'm getting at? The city of Austin, for example, is interested in a number of different types of research being done within its city limits, right? But the universities might pick something more narrowly focused. Is there some guidance on that?
So there it's not just, again, the idea is to have this be an ecosystem. If the community is not going to be engaged if it's just hardcore, really, really fundamental level research. I think you heard there are applications and services that are going to be part or enabled as part of this research. I'm not sure we can take the topics of research offline, but I'm sure that we can build on fundamental research that your universities might be interested in and how it transitioned into the applications and services that you might be looking for. The one thing that Power is you're not going to run production or commercial services on top of the platform. So everything is experimental given the sensitive nature of spectrum that we're operating at.
So the ideal situation is you have a set of nearby university professors or professors who are reachable that have research interests in fundamental areas that also could benefit the other members of the team, in this case the City of Austin. So it's a team effort. Okay.
Hi, I'm Matt Williamson with OptiPulse Incorporated. I had a question about who can prime, and particularly the role of federally funded research development organizations. So the configuration that I was thinking here is you could have a university or a municipality prime. If you want to involve a national lab or a federally funded R&D organization, you were alluding earlier to how they're not able to use these funds, they have to use their own funds. Is that correct?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay, all right.
Good. But we'd encourage participation. In that.
Hey, two questions. Rudra Datta, North Carolina State University. Two questions about the RFP. The first one is the very first merit review criteria group, vision and technical merit,
Yep.
has as the first bullet point, is the research platform focused on disruptive transformative technologies and applications instead of incremental approaches. So I was wondering if one could have extreme examples of things that match this and do not, in the sense of, is this what is being empowered or what is being enabled or what is being used in the test bed? Because one of Manu's slides, I thought that was appropriate, said that there is a collision between predictability and reliability of the test bed and the, so examples would help.
So I think we're going to publish an FAQ. We're actually working on exactly bringing out a couple of scenarios. The reason we are being very cautious is to not sound prescriptive or not draw a box that proposers end up tending to lean towards. So we're trying to be very careful in terms of keeping that balance away. What we are going to publish as part of the FAQ is going to be guidance about the actual vision of what's envisioned, because the idea is these platforms are going to be operational 12 to 18 months, and then they have to be supported for 4 or 5 years. What's the actual vision of where the technology focus is going to be at that time? And then what this modular approach or incremental approach or the stability innovation is, how do you get from that point A to point B? And that's where you chart that path to realize that particular vision. But we'll come up with an example in the FAQ.
I'll keep reading those and keep
Sure.
coming back with questions. The second question I had about the RFP was about the interoperability of the different platforms. And is that like an experiment should be portable from one to the other? In Genie terms, something like the AM API, or is it more like they have to be able to tie up together for a simultaneous experiment? Complementary? Any examples once again?
So Genie is actually a good example. I mean, so NSF has made significant investments in large-scale distributed test beds that are operational today and will continue to be operational as power platforms come online. The idea for interoperability is the ability for that community to participate in power. So in the technical session, I'm going to highlight the services framework, and it's sort of going to be addressed there about the core services provided by the PPO, guidance about federation interoperability, but yes, current NSF investment.
Thank you.
So I think what we're going to do is hold the additional questions now till our Q&A session this afternoon. It's okay, Bill? Are you timing all right? And then I'm going to invite my colleagues, Bill McGuire and Kaushik Chaudhry, to come up and run what we are talking about as lightning talks. Before we do, though, again, we'll have plenty of time for questions this afternoon. I wanted to be sure to introduce Nada Golmi. Nada Golmi, are you here? From INIST. Thank you very much for joining us today. Nada is Chief of Wireless Networks Division in the Communications Technology Lab. Thanks for being here. You've been very helpful at every step of the way, so thank you.